A big component of this will be about the change from this kind of a scenario, of this kind of technology that was used not just by seniors but by all of us for communicating with companies, communicating with each other. Letter writing's been around for thousands of years. The telephone's been around for at least 100, maybe more years. But are our systems, the question is, are our systems and our staffing models designed for this kind of communication with seniors, or is it really in line with what they're doing nowadays? So that's sort of the teaser question from my presentation. Okay, so we've got some data here from the Pew Research Center about internet adoption, and what we see here is that last year 85% of Americans were online in some capacity. That's quite a bit. I mean, we get to 85% of a population doing something, you'd say that's more than just mainstream. That's sort of the dominant communication mode. And you can see it happened very quickly. I remember when I started at John Hancock with Loretta back in, who knows when that was, 93 or so, 94. At that point, I remember getting my first email account, and it was this mainframe, DOS-based system, thing we could communicate, send notes to each other. That was back there. It was close to zero. And in that time, it's gone, in the last 15 years, up to 85% and beyond. So now it's getting closer to 90%. Okay. So what if we split this out by age groups? And we see, we respect seniors probably, people over 65 are probably not quite the adopters that the younger folks are, and that's what we see here. The bottom line are people who are over 65, 65 plus. So we see that they started again, down around 10%, around 2000, and now they're at the majority. 53% are online. And you can see that the groups above them, the next group in line, the 50 to 64, about 80% online. So quite a bit of online activity. And the way to think about this, too, is that every year that a 64-year-old turns into a 65-year-old, they bring their online behavior with them. Okay? Another major point here is that 72% of U.S. adults living with a chronic condition use the internet. So about 3/4 of people with a chronic condition. So you imagine if you take that 53% of the seniors and you just look at the people with chronic conditions, it's going to go up. Okay? Let's take that 53% and it's all of its line that led up to that 53% and just use some standard math, line of best fit, ordinary least squares regression, and just extrapolate it out linearly. And what we see here is that in about 10 years, we're going to be at over 80% elder use of the internet. So that's important, I think. And this is also assuming that nothing changes. This doesn't assume that that group necessarily, the composition of it changes, or that technology becomes easier to use, or some other thing happens to make it easier to use. Basically, we're seeing that almost everybody's going to be online within 10 years of the group we're talking about, which are seniors. And once you get online, you tend to stay online. It's a pretty useful tool, as we all know. 87% of seniors who are already online use email. 50% of them use it every day, according to the Pew Research Center. So it's becoming rapidly their dominant mode of communicating. So that's just being online, using email, all those wonderful things. Let's think about social media next. So who's using social media? So we see here, for the oldest population, this is the chart on the right here, the little one, the 65 plus. In 2011, 15% were using social media. That is, they had a profile page, at least one social media site. That went up 8 points in 1 year between 2011 and 2012. Quite a big jump. Okay, so quarter of them are already online in terms of social media. If we look at social networking use, we see that it's 43% of those who are already online are doing social media. And this is going to be relevant later when we talk about people complaining via social media. It's sort of more of a downside risk for customer service than it is an upside gain. And this is something you may have seen. I see some nods already. This is something that I know just in my office. I asked people about this before this, and they said that, if I have a problem with Verizon, I don't call their customer service line. I go onto their website and I get on their blog and I just write my story. And within a second, like a VP calls me and says, how can we resolve this right now and get you to take that down? So if that isn't happening to you already, that is going to happen. Okay. And sadly, insurers are not keeping pace. Here's one example of online behavior. This is using mobile technologies as a platform for getting service across 6 areas here. Questions, information about products and services, getting quotes, underwriting and billing claims, policy management, account management. And this was a study by Accenture, and they differentiate between what they considered high performers and average. Even if you look at their high performers, these sort of best-in-class insurers, it's less than 20% across any of those that make that available for customer service. So there's a huge gap between what people are using and what they expect and what's being delivered. Okay, so I think the implication is pretty clear that you need to have mobile resources, social media resources dedicated, a way to chat online with people live, all that stuff. Okay, beyond just this is how people want to communicate, there are also many benefits for online communication with seniors. And they actually align with some of the kind of problem areas that people experience as they get older. One is sort of the quality of information or general engagement with their condition. Another is memory and cognition, auditory problems, visual issues. So in terms of take them in order, engagement, online lets people connect to seniors with credible information. So if you're online, you can just give somebody a link and say, let's go to WebMD or MedlinePlus.gov or some other place like that. A quarter of them with a chronic condition chat online with others with the same condition. So it's a way to kind of give them social support, give them a community to connect with. In terms of memory and cognition, provides a written record of their interaction with the company for both parties. It can be shared with family members and caregivers, and it's sort of a permanent document. Which gets into the next point. If you just rely on the telephone, you have auditory issues interfering. You have the problems of hearing loss, background noise, misspeaking, mishearing. I think that they said this. People have a tendency to kind of filter it, the information to be something that's a little rosier than what was actually said. And then visually, of course, you can adjust font sizes, and it's a vehicle for displaying visual aids, which is great, especially as people get older. So these are some tips I took from the Genderological Society of America. And these are some technical issues. They say if you're going to be communicating, whether online or offline, but certainly these could apply to online chats or email or anything like that. Ask open-ended questions, not closed-ended yes-no questions. You want to get people to open up. You want to chunk your ideas instead of using long or complex sentences that kind of circle back on themselves. You want to present your ideas in a kind of a logical, chronological order that's right branching. In other words, if you do this, then this will happen. If you then do this, then this will happen. So it's just sequenced, logically, nice, discrete chunks, not complex sentences that circle back on themselves. Okay? We all know this from going to meetings. It's always good to have an agenda. If you can share your agenda with them ahead of time and present the ideas one at a time in a bulleted form, that always works best. And use concrete language, not anything vague or abstract. And of course, as I mentioned before, visual aids are very useful too, and these are from the U.S. Pharmacopoeia for labeling prescription bottles. And these, I think, this principle could easily be adapted to long-term care claims to kind of show them what the process is, show them what their pool of money looks like, at what rate can they take it out, what it can be used for, how people get paid. All of those things could be shown visually, and I don't think we do a very good job of that right now. But you can see here, from the U.S. Pharmacopoeia, a pill that needs to be taken 4 times a day, you show the person taking it with food 4 times. A person needs to take it at bedtime, you show them, they take the pill, and there they are lying down in bed with the moon and the stars, right? They're very, very clear. You can't get that wrong. Another important issue with communicating with seniors is socio-emotional issues. So making sure that you're showing empathy without patronizing. And there's many well-meaning people who do this. It's just sort of natural in some cases to want to say honey and sweetie, and it's very well-meaning, and you don't want to kind of make them feel bad. But I think it comes across as patronizing. And that's certainly what the advice from experts is, to not do that. You want to address their emotional state. How are you doing? How are you feeling? And let them talk for a while. You want to provide emotional reassurance. You also want to connect the instructions you're giving them to positive emotional outcomes. Like if you take your meds as prescribed, you're going to feel better, you're going to have more energy to play with your grandchildren. Make that connection for them. Okay? Address their living situation, their social contacts, probe any concerns. Of course, we all know there's too many cases of elder abuse or elder neglect. This is a vehicle for kind of getting at some of that. Make sure to include the senior in all communications instead of letting the primary caregiver speak for them. Certainly there are many caregivers out there who want, also maybe well-meaning, but want to do all the talking. And you basically tell the other person what this means for them, but they're sort of the intermediary of the information. You want to resist that as much as possible. If they have power of attorney, they can certainly be copied on any communications. And, just engage them in decision-making. Probe for resources. What do they have available to them? Get them involved. This is about them ultimately, so we want to make sure that they're involved in the conversation. So in conclusion, we say here, the majority are already online. We expect it to leap to over 80% within 10 years. So we want to prepare now to leverage any kind of customer service vehicles that we have that are going to be helpful to them, get those things up and running now, because essentially they're ready, they're there, they're waiting for you. There's nobody on the other end. They're going to use the phone, they're going to use other vehicles, but they probably would rather not. Social media as an adjunct is exploding. There's whole conferences on just this subject, using social media. What's your social media strategy for dealing with dissatisfaction? As they turn to social media to vent frustrations, whether sort of real or imagined, you want to be prepared for fast, accurate, responsible, and empathic mass communication, because when you're responding to them on social media, you're responding to everybody who goes to that page. So you want it to be, fair, balanced, accurate, and project you in the right light. And basically, when you build these customer service programs, these digital ones, you want to make sure to incorporate those kinds of general principles for communicating with seniors effectively. And that's it for my section.